Trash. The war on trash will determine the future of humanity. Piles of garbage now fill our cities, forests, and oceans. The byproducts of our hyper-intense pursuit of wealth and luxury. Human beings have produced the most nightmarishly vile, filthy, and disgusting forms of waste that one can imagine. But I have an answer to defeat this plague. Through the years, I have studied the esoteric wisdom of the ancient monks and philosophers, and I have convened with the titans of commerce and academia to forge new solutions to the problems that confront us. My efforts have bestowed upon me the wisdom that will allow us to end the trash wars, to make a future free from the pursuit of conquest, and to unite humankind under one banner of peace and tranquility. You see, the great secret is... hold on. Hello? Oh yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm doing great. No, I'm just filming this video on trash wars. I'm about to reveal the secret of world peace and a sustainable future and all that. Yeah. Yeah, that trash war video. Yeah, we're talking about it. Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Well, no, I didn't know that about trash. Well, yes, that is very interesting. Yeah. Uh-huh. 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 Okay, guys, so it turns out that trash is awesome, and we probably need a whole lot more of it instead of less. Trash units do not cost gold, and they basically counter gold units. How insane is that? So, trash wars are awesome, but here's the issue. Not every civilization has access to the same kind and quality of trash units. And so, while trash wars can be a lot of fun, you really don't want to play a 2-hour-long game just to lose, right? So, because conquest is really the only thing that matters in life, in this video, we're going to be ranking and discussing the best civilizations for trash wars in Age of Empires 2 DE, so that you don't drown yourself in a pool of misery because not only did you forget you had a date with Cynthia and are now 4 hours late, but you're also minus 16 ELO points to show for it. So let's get into this video and get after it. What is going on, everybody? It's Jimmy James 59, and we have a very exciting tier list, very exciting video for you. If you like what we're doing here in this video and on the channel, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the notification bell so when we have new content, you are always immediately notified. On this channel, we want to keep this game that we love going by introducing the game to new players who are trying to figure things out. There are 39 civs and there's a lot of stuff going on, so there's a lot to figure out. And also, hey, the thing about those of us who have been playing this game for a while, whether you grew up with it in childhood or you've been with the game on HD or Voobly, or even since Definitive Edition, it's been out for a couple years now, all of us know that there's always something more to learn in this game. And by having these discussions, interacting with one another, thinking about the civilizations, we're working towards that. So with all that being said, I want to go ahead, jump in the video. And as you know, in my tier list, I really like to sketch out up front the considerations that I am going to be taking into my calculations for figuring out where I'm going to rank these civilizations. And this can be really tough to do in Trash Wars because there's so many different things to think about. And at the end of the day, a lot of this really is my opinion. So if you agree with me, disagree with me, go ahead and leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd be interested to see what you think. And we do a great job on this channel and in our comment section of keeping things civil between one another. And we've had some great discussions. So I really like to see the kind of ideas that you all are putting out there as well. Now, this is my opinion, but I do like to make it as informed an opinion as possible. And so that's what I'm going to be doing right now, is give you what I'm considering so you know where I'm coming from, right? And so there's really three things here, right? In terms of trash wars, one is the timing, right? Trash Wars are a unique phase of the game when the gold mines on the map have been depleted, and really the only gold available is through the collection of relics or selling resources at the market. Usually for by this time in the game, usually not for the best return rate on those trades. So when we're thinking about Trash Wars, we're not really thinking about the game as it plays out through the ages. We are really thinking all the way in post-Imperial Age, where most of your technologies are researched at this point. You've probably already upgraded all of your units, and the game at this point becomes really about keeping a mass of units that you can continue refreshing and throwing into battle. I mean, it really is a war of attrition here. So the timing, right, we're going to be considering really only this late stage of the game. When it comes to military, there's a few things. Having access to Hussar, Halberdier, and Elite Skirmisher can be really important. Also having access to the champion line, because champions are a trash busting unit. They counter Hussars, Halberdiers, and Elite Skirmishers fairly well, and so having the champion is really important. If a civilization does have a melee infantry unique unit, we'll consider that here, but to create most melee infantry units, you do need a castle, and it's very possible that at this stage of the game, you might not have that many castles. So, and they also tend to be a little bit more expensive than champions as well. So we're going to give a bit more weight to having good champions, but also factor in melee infantry units. Whether or not a civilization has access to the siege ram is actually pretty important, because for a siege weapon that can destroy buildings, it's really one of the cheapest versions. Trebuchets are very expensive, bombard cannons are very expensive, particularly on the gold front. And scorpions are not that expensive, but they don't do a lot of damage against buildings. So siege rams, right, I think they're 160 wood, 75 gold, something like that. And that's a pretty good price to pay for a unit that can start destroying the buildings of your opponent. So it's very good. Now, also going to be considering whether a unit is fully upgraded or has a civilization bonus. So we're going to be thinking about armor upgrades and attack upgrades. And these actually really matter in Trash Wars, because most of your trash units are not doing all that much base damage. A lot of their damage comes from their bonus damage. Halberdiers are probably the greatest example of this. Their base damage is actually quite low, but they do a lot of bonus damage to cavalry units and also to ships, interestingly enough. But that's great when you're up against heavy cavalry in particular, but when you're up against, say, other halberdiers, it's not having an effect, right? So lacking blast furnace on your halberdiers really matters, because you're going from basically doing 10 damage to 8 damage, and then if you factor in having 3 melee armor, if you have all the upgrades, you're really going from 7 to 5 damage, which is a pretty big decrease. It's like a 28-29% decrease. Kind of just doing the math in my head here. And without getting like too, mathy about it, I mean, think about the bonuses in the game that say increase in attack speed by 33% or by, say, 15%, right? Think about the effect of Thumb Ring increasing the attack rate on archers, right? These changing the rate by a number like that can have a really big impact on the outcome of a battle, so that is going to matter. The armor and attack upgrades do matter in Trash Wars. Also for the cavalry, thinking about bloodlines for the extra HP, husbandry for the extra speed is pretty important. For infantry, having squires, right, being able to get around the map a little bit quicker can be very important. Thumb Ring for skirmishers is actually pretty marginal. I debated even putting it on this list. The only thing I just say is it does separate. It is one of the few things from outside the blacksmith upgrades that does separate some units from one another, but it's really marginal. So I doubt it's going to change the game that much, except maybe in a limit case. We'll have to see. And then unit production bonuses. So like anything that increases, I mean, just in general, anything that increases the strength, the affordability, the ability to spam units out from production buildings is going to be a big help here from a military consideration. And then we have the economic considerations. Any bonuses that enable sustained production, or which is either through increasing the speed with which units are created at buildings or decreasing the cost so you can create more of them at once. Fantastic. And we're also going to consider two-man saw and crop rotation here. Two-man saw is the Imperial Age upgrade to increase the gather rate on your lumberjacks. I think it's by 10%. This can actually matter a bit because, again, we're talking about making trash units. Skirmishers and halberdiers cost wood, and hussars take up a lot of food, so you need a lot of farms, which means you need a lot of wood. Two-man saw can help you afford these kind of production capabilities in the late game. And crop rotation, which generally isn't all that highly thought of, and I think is usually situational in terms of its usefulness. But in a trash war, it can be really useful for two reasons. One, the extra farm and the extra food you get on your farms in crop rotation can enable your farms to last longer, and you just have more food. Secondly, by lasting longer, you're spending less wood, and a lot of times a really long trash war will end when one side simply just runs out of wood and they can't afford anything yet, right? If you have crop rotation, you're going to preserve your forest, right? This is our eco-friendly intro, right? Crop rotation, very good. And, right, you're going to preserve your forest so that you have more wood, and that might enable you to have production more than your opponent and be able to win the game. So it's kind of situational. I'll mention it from time to time. It is something that I did consider in this video, and that's where I'm coming from here. So let's go ahead with that, and we are going to jump into the video as soon as I pull up my notes here. And okay, we've got them. So let's go in first to the Aztecs. Aztecs are, I think, this is one of the trickiest civs for me to think of in a trash war. I think it's either a C or a D tier. I'm going to put it in the D tier. So Aztecs do have really nice skirmishers. You have the Atlatl technology that gives you an extra damage and extra range. So you have great range on your skirms. But you are missing the last armor upgrade on them, and you are missing Thumb Ring. So against fully upgraded skirmishers that have that extra armor, you're not as far ahead, right? You're doing really nice against halberdiers in this because, again, you're keeping with the extra range and damage, you're keeping halberdiers from getting closer, and skirmishers do have a nice little bonus damage against the spear line. But when you're up against other skirmishers, you're good, but it just kind of cancels things out. And you do have really good champions or jaguar warriors to be a trash busting unit. So having champs and jags is really nice. Your economy is quite strong, though we're in the late game, and I think by the late game, the advantage in economy, if the game hasn't snowballed out of control into Aztecs just straight up winning, if we're in a trash war, the difference in our economies is probably not that insane at this point, as it might be, say, in the early game. Now, the problems with the Aztecs are that you're missing the halberdier upgrade, and you do get Garland Wars to make up for that a little bit. And I don't know. I mean, it is nice having, I think it's the 12 damage on your pikemen to fight against other halbs. But the thing is, but you're just not doing the kind of bonus damage. I don't know. Aztecs are a really tough case here. I mean, I think Garland Wars is really, really important for this civ. You know what? It's the first civ in the video, and it shows you how difficult it can be to rank these civs. But I think Garland Wars pikemen, the real trick is how well they do against halberdiers. And I think that the jump going from HP from pikemen to halberdier is, I think it's like 55 to 60. And the question is, would you rather have the 5 more HP or the extra 2 attack? And I don't know, I think I would rather have the extra 2 attack. And since there's not going to be a lot of heavy cavalry on the field at this stage of the game, missing halberdier, because you have Garland Wars, may not be the biggest, may not hurt you as much as it might other civs. So the fact that you do have the good skirmishers, the good trash busters, and you do have some decent pikemen, I think we could make a good case for putting Aztecs in the C tier here. Now, the big thing that's going to keep them way, way out of ever getting in to B tier, right, and it's keeping them really as a limit civ in this case, is the fact that you're missing the stable completely, so no light cavalry at all, and so that can get really, really tricky. Pikemen are still really effective against hussars, so that's why, you know, missing halberdier is, it sucks, but doesn't suck as much as when you're up against, say, heavy cavalry. Right? Okay, speaking of Berbers, one of the classic heavy cavalry civilizations in the game, but how do they fare in Trash Wars is our question in this video. And I gotta say, I really like Berbers a lot. I think that they're a nice, solid A tier. Now, the Berbers are also missing halberdiers, and they don't get any fun bonuses to their pikemen. But the Berbers have a lot of other things going their way. First of all, you have the cheapest hussars in the game, 20% discount on the food cost in Imperial Age. That is very nice for production. You have fully upgraded skirmishers. That's good to go. Fully upgraded champions. You have your trash busting unit, and you have a unique unit in the Genitor. The Genitor is a fantastic unit at this stage of the game, right? It's for a trash unit, it's a bit expensive, and so because you can only get it in Castle Age, and it can actually be early on quite difficult to mass up enough Genitors to really make a difference, and they're essentially a mounted skirmisher, so in the early game, they're just not doing the damage potential and not helping you win to the same degree, and they cost a bit too much to pair with another unit earlier on. But once we get to the stage where the economies are pretty big and we have a lot of resources, Genitors suddenly become a more cost-effective option. I mean, they're more population efficient than skirmishers, which is great, but more cost-effective at this point compared to what they would be in the early game. And so I think Genitors can really, really shine in a Trash Wars type role and be able to just run around, hit and run opponents, run away from halberdiers, take the fights you want, and help out the hussars that the Berbers would likely be employing along with them in a trash war. I think it's really, really quite strong, and so that's really good for the Berbers. I also say, too, the fact that your camels are also getting a 20% discount, you might be able to mix in some camels with this civilization. Again, there are probably going to be pikes or halberdiers in the field, and camels really struggle against those, so I think it's pretty marginal. I don't think it makes up for missing halbs for the reasons that I just said, but I do think we have a strong A-tier civilization. Next up, we have the Bohemians, and I think the Bohemians are going to go into the C tier. You have great halberdiers that do extra bonus damage. However, that's not going to help you in halberdier versus halberdier fights, and against hussars, well, halberdiers already wreck hussars pretty hard, and being able to wreck them even harder, I think that the returns are diminishing at this stage of the game, right? So fighting against other halbs or just any other melee unit, I think is much more important, and your halbs are going to be generic there. They're fully upgraded, so they're fine. Your skirmishers are reasonable, missing the last armor upgrade, so they're a little down in that regard. And the Bohemian economy is pretty good. Your opponents may have already researched the gold mining upgrades and things like that, and there's not a lot of gold on the map anyways at this point, so those upgrades probably aren't helping you. Things like Fervor and Sanctity, right, increasing the HP and movement speed of your villagers, that is pretty good to help out your late game economy, so it's pretty good, but unfortunately you also have terrible cavalry to go along with rather mediocre skirmishers, and your halberdiers, which, you know, since there's no heavy cavalry on the field, are a lot closer to generic than you'd probably think. So I think that this makes them a nice C-tier civ. You have options, and I would say this about all the civs. Almost every civilization in the game has some kind of trash unit that it can lean on. So remember, this is, when we do a tier list, this is a relative sort of ranking system. So if every civilization has a trash unit they can lean on, you need something else to get you out of the D tier, right? So that's the way we're approaching this here. Okay, next up we have the Britons, and I think Britons are a really solid B-tier Trash War civilization. You have really nice skirmishers that you can produce faster because of the archery range bonus, and they have an extra range because of the yeoman technology. You are missing the technology of Thumb Ring, but that's just going to make your skirmishers a little less accurate, going from like 90 to 100% against stationary targets. Right, we have big masses of units in this post-imperial setting usually, so your skirmishers are going to hit something. Now, they may do half damage because that's the way that missed shots hitting another target work in Age of Empires for pretty much all units except for Rambai. So even then, right, 90% accuracy is still pretty darn good. So Britons, I think, have really nice skirmishers. You have fully upgraded halberdiers, fully upgraded champion. You have pretty reasonable light cavalry. You're missing hussar, you're missing bloodlines, but you do get all the armor upgrades. So your light cavalry are a nice raiding option. And you also get two-man saw to help with your wood production. So I think that that Britons, right, are a really nice B tier, maybe even one of the better B tier civilizations. Okay, next up we have the Bulgarians, and I think Bulgarians, all right, this might seem a bit unusual. I think that they're S tier. Now hear me out, right? Because of the stirrups technology, which you can get in Castle Age and is pretty affordable, Bulgarian hussars, which are fully upgraded, have a plus 33% attack rate, right? You have basically the highest DPS hussars in the game from the stable, and that is fantastic, right? You can kill villagers a lot quicker, which means that you don't have to spend as much time underneath town centers. It's a really nice technology. It enables you to defeat other civilizations' hussars pretty easily, and it's just a fantastic unit. You also get fully upgraded halberdiers. Your elite skirmishers are missing the last armor, but with the halberdiers, the great hussars, mediocre skirms, hey, you're gonna usually there's only one civ in the game that has all their trash units fully upgraded. So the fact that you're missing a little bit here or there, with the skirmishers, you do have the important technologies here. You do have bracer, and that's really, really important for your damage output. And with those really strong hussars that you're going to have, it's great. But the Bulgarians actually, we keep going because you get all your swordsman line upgrades for free, and the Bagains technology I believe gives them +5 melee armor for your two-handed swordsman. So you just have a super tanky trash killer in the two-handed swordsman, and you really don't have to research all that much to get it because you're getting those swordsman upgrades for free. So if you have the barracks up, just go ahead and start spamming those boys, and when you get Bagains, they become amazing. Now, if we're not done here, right? Because the blacksmith upgrades cost -50% food, which means that it's really easy to go ahead and get all of your technologies for your units. And we keep going. The -50% stone cost for Bulgarians can actually be really strong in a trash war because you're going to have a lot of farms and you might need town centers to protect those farms versus just farming around mills. Farming around mills can get really dicey when you get raided because there's really nowhere for your villagers to go. And Bulgarians are a civilization that, given that wood is really not in a difficult to find state usually in a trash war until the very, very end, you can get a lot more town centers up, protect your villagers, or you can even make Krayposts, which are kind of mini castles, and that can help with map control. Bulgarians do get crop rotation, which is, very nice for keeping those farms alive. Missing two-man saw is a bit tricky. I actually wonder sometimes, thinking about this video, which might be more important for a trash war, two-man saw, crop rotation. That's an interesting video idea I'm going to keep in mind. But Bulgarians also have -50% food cost on their Siege Workshop upgrades as well, which means that Bulgarians can get to Siege Ram at an extremely affordable rate. Very, very easy for them to get there. And so Bulgarians, man, they're just hitting a lot of the boxes. And for me, that puts them in the S tier. So Bulgarians are our first S tier civilization. All right, next up, we have the Burgundians. And the Burgundians, I gotta say, I think I gotta put them in the C tier. So, you know what though, actually, let me revise this. I actually think Burgundians are really unusual, but I do think that they're a B tier civilization, but it's not so much the strength of their units, it's the strength of their economy. So, Burgundians get fully upgraded halbs. You get hussars that are only lacking bloodlines, so they're still usable as a raiding unit, but the thing with the hussars though is that your stable technologies are 50% discounted. And so Hussar is actually a pretty expensive upgrade. I think it's 500 food, 600 gold. Getting the discount on both the food and the gold cost is very, very nice because a lot of times if you're in a late game situation and gold is low, you actually might not have the resources to research Hussar, or you might have to spend a lot of resources to buy the gold to do it. So The fact that you have that discount is really, really nice for Burgundians, and so it's a bit of a plus for them. Your skirmishers are fairly mediocre, so we can't really give them much credit there. But the thing with Burgundians, though, is that you have a few things going for you. The Burgundian Vineyards technology allows your farms to produce gold. And so, with Burgundians, who also get fully upgraded champions, I believe, somebody can correct me on that below if I'm wrong, you can sustain trash-busting units pretty well as long as you have your farms protected. That's really, really nice, right? It's really nice, and you got to hand it to them. It's a really good technology. And you know what? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So the fact that you have gold means you can do a lot more things. Burgundians also have the Flemish Revolution that they can research at some point. You've probably already researched it if you're Burgundians, and we still have this trash war going on. But so the fact that you do have these farms that are making gold, you can probably mix in some Flemish militia into your army. And Flemish militia are basically kind of a mix between a champion and a halberdier, so it can be a really strong unit. You probably can't mass produce them, but it's something you can mix in. And also with Burgundians, your relics also produce food, so if you have some relics, you're just going to see yourself, you're going to have a lot of food and gold, and that's exactly what you need if you want to afford those trash-busting units in the late game. So I think that Burgundians are a surprisingly low-key Trash Wars civilization. I don't think it's any better than a B tier because the Hussars aren't good enough and the Skirmishers aren't good enough, and the Halberdiers are pretty generic. But the whole idea with Burgundians is usually to be able to afford gold units when it's pretty difficult on your opponent to do so. Burgundians have the economy to do it. Getting the free economic upgrades, or well, not free, but discounted earlier, that's not helping you as much here. Most of those things should be researched, so I think it's a B tier. Okay, next up we have the Burmese. Burmese, I think, are really, really interesting here. I think that Burmese are actually an A tier Trash Wars Civ. So Burmese have very strong halberdiers and champions because they get an extra melee damage in each age. So you're going to still be really good against cavalry, and your halberdiers will wreck other halberdiers. In most cases, very good. Your hussars are fully upgraded and have a technology that gives them +5 damage against archery units. So that can be very, very strong if your opponent is trying to mix some archers in, and I believe that also affects skirmishers. So you can really knock out skirmishers quick. The only trouble with Burmese is that your skirmishers are missing the second armor upgrade, and that does matter a lot. So, but if you do have this, if you just eschew the whole skirmisher line and you go with this hussar halberdier sort of force, I think that that's enough. It's so strong in the late game. I think it can be enough to deal with your enemies. So I think I got to put Burmese in the A tier based on that. I think it's surprisingly underrated in that capacity. Okay, next up we have the Byzantines, and this probably comes to no surprise as anybody who's been around the game for a while. Byzantines are S tier. Your halberdiers and your elite skirmishers are really cheap. Your skirmishers are fully upgraded. Your halberdiers are only missing blast furnace, but they're so cheap you can usually win in numbers. Your hussars are only missing bloodlines, so again, pretty reasonable. You get siege ram, which is very nice, and you have both crop rotation and two-man saw, so your late game economy, you're not going to be absorbing nearly as much wood as some other civs, and so this sometimes means that you really can outlast your opponent. So Byzantines, easy S tier. Next up we have the Goths, and sorry, not the Goths, we have the Celts, excuse me. Celts I think are pretty interesting. I gotta put Celts in the C tier, and the rationale is that they have really nice halberdiers and really nice champions because they have extra movement speed. Their hussars are not very good. Their skirmishers are not very good. The wood chopping bonus is nice. You do miss two-man saw, but because of the civilization bonus, you do have still more effective lumberjacks, even if it's only slightly in the late game. I think it's the combination of having the really, really strong halberdiers and champions, and also the Woad Raider can be a really nice unit here. And not only that, but having the Fura Celtica giving your siege workshop weapons more HP, you might be able to keep some of those siege weapons alive. I think it's a C tier. but the Hussars and Skirms are just so bad that that really keeps it from getting anywhere close to the B tier. I think it's much closer to being a D tier trash civ than a B tier one. Next up, we have the Chinese, and Chinese are going to slide. For me, they're actually going to slide into the A tier. Chinese are just such a flexible civilization. Yeah, fully upgraded halberdiers, fully upgraded skirms, fully upgraded light cav. You're only missing the hussar upgrade. You get champions that have all the performance upgrades, but you don't get supplies. So that can be kind of difficult, but it's affecting your food cost. So the gold cost would be the same either way. You do get siege ram, you get two-man saw. Your technologies are cheaper, so that can help you as well. But I think Chinese, they're so well-rounded, and that's definitely enough for the A tier. They just don't have really anything special that is allowing them to get into that S tier area. So Chinese still pretty darn good, though. I am completely comfortable putting them into the A tier. All right, next up we have Cumans, and you know what? Cumans, we're going to stay in the A tier, folks. So the thing with Cumans is that it all comes down to their hussar production to me. The stepped husbandry technology, which is available in Castle Age, very affordable, increases the production speed on their hussars by something like 50%. That is insanely good. And you also have such cheap stables that with Cumans, you can pump out hussars like a beast. And oftentimes, trash units, it's often a battle of attrition. You're expecting them to die. You're often making trades with them where you might sacrifice 20 hussars to kill a trebuchet, but it's worth it because you can get 20 more hussars out in just a few seconds. And with the Cumans, you're doing it even faster. Not only that, but you're getting fully upgraded halberdiers, and I believe that Cumans get champions. I believe this to be the case. I might, while I speak, have to look this up on the internet, but it's worth talking about how their skirms are not very good, and so that is something that is worth keeping in mind. But you have enough things there for them, and yeah, they do get fully upgraded champions, I believe. Just got to check the blacksmith technologies, actually. Let's look. And yeah, fully upgraded. Very good, right? So, all right, see, I know things in this brain. So, Cumans are good, right? Cumans you have the halbs, you have the great production, you have the champs. Your Skirmers Misbracer, that's not very good. You do have Siege Ram. I do believe you get two-man saw, and I'm pretty sure you also get crop rotation with that as well. So your late game economy should be pretty strong with Cumans, and for me, that's enough. I'll also say, actually, the Kipchek is a pretty affordable unit. It only costs 35 gold, which is very affordable for an archer unit. And not only that, but its elite upgrade doesn't cost any gold. So if you're looking for a mobile archer unit with the Cumans, and you have some relics, and you're getting that like little bit of that trickle of that gold income, I don't know. I think that there's still a place for the Kipchek. It is surprisingly a cost-effective unit, and the fact that the elite upgrade only costs wood and food means that you can get a really strong unit on the field for not that much of an expense. So I don't know. I think that that's enough to put them in the A tier. Again, I just don't think that they have as special of enough option among their trash units to really put them into the S tier. Next up, we have the Ethiopians, and Ethiopians to me are really, really tricky here. I'm going to put them into the B tier, but I have some reservations, so I'll talk about it here. The great things is that you do get fully upgraded halberdiers, fully upgraded skirmishers, and you don't actually have to pay for the pikeman upgrade, which is nice. It's not the most expensive upgrade in the late game, but it's still helping you out. You have Shotel warriors, which create really quickly. They're a little expensive, but they're a nice fast raiding unit, and that can be really nice. The problem with Ethiopians is that you have Hussar, but you're missing a lot of the technologies on it, and you also don't get champions, so you're really reliant on the Shotel warrior for being a trash killing unit. And the problem with the Shotel is that it just doesn't have a lot of HP, so it can't really stand and fight. It does a lot of damage, but even though it creates really quickly, it's just not as good as a champion. But I do think that the combination of having the fully upgraded halberdiers and fully upgraded skirmishers, and if you can afford showtells, if you can afford them, then it could be a nice unit to mix in just because they create so quickly. But I do have my reservations putting them in the B tier. I think that they're much, much closer to being a C tier civ, but they have enough options to where it seems reasonable to me. Okay, next up we have the Franks, and Franks are interesting. For me, Franks are a C tier trash civ. So you have fully upgraded halberdiers, that's nice. Your skirmishers are awful. The thing with Franks is that your light cavalry are a really mixed bag. On the one hand, they are not that great. You miss Hussar. You don't have bloodlines, but you do get plus 20% HP on your cavalry. And that means that basically your light cavalry have 72 HP, whereas light cavalry with bloodlines have 80. That's a pretty noticeable decrease. But the thing with Franks is that you do have the chivalry technology that increases the production speed of your stables by something like 40%. And guys, that's nothing to sneeze at. You really can spam light cavalry with this civilization. So I think we got to keep them in the C tier. I don't think they're good enough to make it into the B tier, though, because their scrims are so bad, and their light cavalry still isn't that great. Okay, next up, the Goths. And the Goths, for me, are really an easy trash tier, an easy trash war civ. Might be one of the best ones in the game, I think. You have really cheap halberdiers and really cheap champions. You're missing the last armor upgrade, but you have plus 10 population space anyways, so you know you're going to get more units than the other guy. And you have barracks that work extremely fast. Not only that, but you do have reasonable trash units elsewhere. Your Hussars are missing the last armor upgrade, but they do get bloodlines, so they're actually a pretty surprisingly strong option. They'll still die under town centers and things like that, and you would really like to have the extra armor to deal with, maybe something like masses of skirmishers, but still not a bad unit. And not only that, elite skirmisher, you're really only missing thumb ring, which is, again, as we talked about, not that important for skirmishers. So with Goths, you have a lot there. You have crop rotation, you have two-man saw, and not only that, but your unique unit, the Huskarl, if you can ever get the gold to afford a few of them, you can make those at the barracks as well. So you don't need the castles to do it. It's easy S tier. Goths are a civilization that, in no uncertain terms, that you ever want to be facing in any kind of late game situation. So Goths, S tier. Next up, we have the Huns. And Huns, I think, are also going to wind up in the B tier. I'm a lot more comfortable putting Huns in the B tier. You have fully upgraded Hussars and extra production speed on your stable, which is fantastic for spamming out units and keeping a raid going on for a good amount of time. You have reasonable halberdiers that are missing the last armor upgrade, reasonable skirmishers also missing the last armor upgrade. So they're decent units, but they're not the greatest. You also have the atheism technology. Now, this doesn't come up very often, but the atheism technology, in a recent patch, it was changed so that it reduces the gold income of your enemy's relics. Now, a lot of times this is not going to be having an effect in a game, but in a trash war, where often your only convenient source of gold are your relics, losing a lot of that relic income can be a massive downgrade. And if you're the Huns, and let's say if you have 3 relics, you can basically make it so that the other player only has 1 relic. That's really giving you a lot more of an advantage, and so that's a low-key pretty good technology to have there in this particular situation. Probably not helping you in a lot of other places. Unfortunately, with Huns, you are missing champions, and you are missing the last armor upgrade as well. So you don't really have a good trash-busting unit, and for me, that really is what keeps them out of the... That really does keep them out of the A tier for me. So Huns, B tier, very comfortable with that. Next up, we have the Incas, and American civs tend to struggle in trash wars. I actually think, though, that Incas are probably a C tier. You get fully upgraded halberdiers, fully upgraded champions, and you do have fully upgraded skirmishers for which you can remove the minimum range, and that's quite good in a trash war where you might have frontline units of skirms that are taking damage, and just to be able to have them target another unit can be pretty good. So you also have the Kamiyuk. It's a unique unit infantry. It's a pretty nice, if you can get it massed, it could be a pretty nice option in the late game to have because it attacks from a little bit further away. It's pretty tanky as well. So it's a good unit. The real problem with the Inca is it's two problems. You're missing stables and you don't have a really good late game economic bonus. So, it's an okay C tier civ. Okay, now let's take a look at our list at the Indians. Indians are pretty interesting as well. I think that they are much more of a B tier civ here. So you have almost fully upgraded Hussar. You're only missing a melee upgrade, which in a trash war can be important when you're fighting other Hussars. You're going to lose to Halbs anyways, so not that big of a deal there. And you do have all your Pierce armor for Indians, so you're still going to do the same against ranged units. You do get fully upgraded skirmishers. Your halberdiers and your champions are missing the last armor, and that's very unfortunate. But you do have cheaper villagers, so if you need to replace villagers, that can be pretty easy. You do have the Sultan's technology increasing gold income from basically any gold sources. So whether it is, well, you're probably not going to be trading at all in Trash Wars because Trash Wars are pretty specific to 1v1s. But if you do have relics, it's going to increase your relic income modestly. At B tier, probably closer to C tier than A tier, but I think still probably a B tier civ. Still pretty flexible. Okay, next up we have the Italians, and I think Italians are a B tier civilization as well. You have fully upgraded skirmishers, fully upgraded Hussar, fully upgraded champions. You do have the Condottiero as a trash busting unit. It's pretty intensive on the gold, so you probably shouldn't be seeing it that much in a setting of a trash war. But if you do manage to get a bit of gold accumulated and you haven't researched any of your swordsman line upgrades, mixing some Condottieros in, they're very fast, they create really quickly, and they're pretty tanky units. Could be a nice trash busting alternative if you just don't have the time to get in a champion and for some reason you do have the gold to make them. Now, it should be also noted you do have cheaper hand cannoneers if you can get to them. Cheaper bombard cannons, again, if you can get to them. The only problem with Italians is that you're missing the halberdier upgrade. Genoese crossbowmen and the trash war probably aren't making up for that. So with Italians, I think with Italians it really does come down to just how much gold can you save earlier in the game and can you get to some other options. But you do have fully upgraded skirms and Hussars, so still pretty good options there. But I think that you're missing enough to just keep them solid in the B tier. Okay, next up we have the Japanese. And for me, Japanese are really easy A tier. And I will say, I think that they are pushing S tier. But let's talk about what they have. They have really strong halberdiers with a plus 33% attack rate. Really strong champions, plus 33% attack rate as well. Fully upgraded otherwise, very good. Fully upgraded skirmishers. So, I mean, your champions, and then the samurai, right, is even better than a champion. Not quite as cost effective, but is an even better unit and creates pretty quickly from the castle. You have some fantastic trash busting units. You also have very strong towers with Japanese. So, if, you can't go for something like castles, and you want to try to use some towers with the Asama technology to take some map control, that can also be pretty strong. The only problem with the Japanese is that your light cavalry they're okay. They're okay. You have bloodlines in your light cavalry, but you're missing the Hussar upgrade and you're missing the last armor upgrade. And that's pretty unfortunate because it does mean you're missing some HP from the Hussar and you're missing +2 armor. So again, you can raid with Japanese light cavalry. Trust me, I do it all the time. But in a trash war, when it's really important that you keep big masses of units and you want some durability, you're missing quite a bit. So you might find that you have to replace them a lot, and that can cut into your production in some other areas. So I think the Japanese, for me, they have to stay in the A tier, but I think it's possible, at least so far on this list, I think that they're the best A tier civ on this list so far. So, give them a gold star. Next up, we have the Khmer. And Khmer, I think, are probably another B tier civilization. Your Hussars are fully upgraded. Your Halberdiers are okay, right? You don't get the last armor upgrade, and you don't get Squires. So, your Halberdiers are pretty mediocre, actually. Your Skirmers are only missing Thumb Ring, which is fine. So, you have some nice options. You have the farming bonus, right? That you don't have to drop off food at resource buildings. Really nice for spamming out Hussars. But you're missing champions, so you don't have a trash busting unit. And even with that, your melee unit, the Halberdiers, still not very good. So I think this is definitely much more of a B tier civ. You do have some options, but it's still not great. Okay, now let's take a look at the Koreans. And Koreans, for me, are going to be a C tier civilization here. You do have champions and halberdiers, but you're missing Blast Furnace, so that's going to really hurt you in a trash war, I think. Your skirmishers are fully upgraded, which is nice, but your cavalry is just awful. And otherwise, you really don't have a good eco bonus helping you. So it's pretty mediocre civ, actually, in terms of the trash wars. So I don't really see any way we can put them into the B tier here. They just don't really have quite enough really good options. So C tier for the Koreans. Okay, next up we have the Lithuanians, and I gotta say, for me, I really think that the Lithuanians might be the strongest Trash Wars civ in the game. And there's a lot of reasons here. First of all, you have Wing Hussars. They are insane. Very strong unit. You have, not only do you have fully upgraded skirmishers, but you have extra pierce armor on them. So, and they move faster. So they're mobile. They're very tanky. Your opponent is insane to make ranged units against you if you have fully upgraded skirmishers. And hey, you know what? You can sit under town centers probably for longer and fire, maybe even castles. Lithuanian skirms are insane. Your halberdiers are missing the last armor, but you do get extra pierce armor to make up for it with the Imperial Age technology that's also benefiting your skirmishers. And they move faster too, so your halbs and skirmishers are just going to be moving all over the place, keeping up with your winged hussars. Really nice. You do have champions. You do miss supplies, so here's where they start to get a little weaker. You miss supplies and blast furnace, so your champions aren't great, and your halberdiers are not going to have the kind of damage output that you would like, and they're missing a melee armor, so your halbs are not very good melee fighters. I do think that that hurts them a little bit, but they're still pretty good, and when it comes to raiding and dealing with opponents, you're just so well balanced out with the winged hussars and skirmishers. And if you have some gold, with Lithuanians, you might want to mix in something, say, like hand cannons into your army maybe instead, if you can do it, perhaps instead of champions. But to me, easy S tier civilization for their trash. All right, next up we have the Magyars, and, well, if there's a contender for best trash civilization, I think that Magyars probably would have something to say. You have fully upgraded skirmishers, you have fully upgraded hussars that are 15% discounted. You never have to research your attack upgrades. So, I mean, most people have them researched anyways, but still resources you save. But you also have the Magyar Hussar. After Corvinian Army researched, hopefully in the Castle Age for you, you have a really cheap, super strong light cavalry option. Your champs and halberdiers are not terrible. You miss the last armor upgrade. You do miss squires, but they're still there. But honestly, the Magyar Hussar for me really just takes this to the top. You do have two-man saw, you do have crop rotation, so your late game economy is not going to be burning through a ton of wood. If you have, say, 2 or 3 castles standing with Magyars, you should be in a really good position to win most trash wars. Okay, next up, the Malay. And Malay are a tough one. What do we think about the Malay here? I think that Malay probably have to go into the A tier. I say this with reservations. So here's the thing with Malay. You have fully upgraded halberdiers, fully upgraded skirmishers. This is really good. You have terrible light cavalry. That's really awful. But if you can research forced levy, which is pretty expensive, I think it's 1,200 food, 500 gold. You can turn your two-handed swordsmen into trash units, and they basically cost 80 food a pop. So essentially what they're doing is they're replacing your hussars in terms of their food cost. I think they cost 80 food. This can be pretty overwhelming for an opponent. And you get the fully upgraded halbs and the fully upgraded skirms. So this is what I'm going to say. I'm actually going to move Malay in the S tier because I don't want to be too biased towards open maps. I am trying to consider and think about closed maps or maybe even hybrid maps like Four Lakes. I think on a closed map, for me, Malay are definitely S tier trash civ. Let's take a moment to hydrate. I think on an open map, this is more of an A tier. I would rather have hussars. So, but I think in the end, the two-handed swordsman spam, if it can be done, is so strong. I'll keep them in the S tier. Right, they're good. Malay can be very strong in late game scenarios and just mixing in all kinds of trash units. Next up, we have the Malians. Right, Malians for me, I think are B tier. So, Farimba light cavalry are very strong. The fact that your infantry get extra pierce armor as you go through the ages is extremely strong. So you have champions, you're missing blast furnace, but if there are any ranged units on the field, you're going to be fine. And they do a lot of damage, but you should die to other civilizations champions. That is kind of a bummer. You're missing halbs. Your pikemen are pretty hit or miss, and they're also not getting blast furnace, right? So your pikes are really going to lose to other civilization spearline units, and your skirms will get bracer. Now, to me, the thing, you add all this up together right from the jump, and I say, okay, maybe Malians are more of a C tier civ. But since one of the more recent patches, their gold lasts 30% longer. So with Malians, there's a lot of times that other civilizations have entered the trash war phase, but they haven't got the memo that you have not entered the phase yet. So with Malians, actually, you're probably going to have gold longer than the other guy, and so you're kind of delaying the start of that trash war, which can be a real advantage that, if somebody else is forced into the trash war before you are. And I also got to say, with the Malians, the fact that your wood cost in your production buildings is discounted means that you can usually get more production buildings in the late game to spam things like Farimba Light Cav or more Champ Scarls or even Pikes that, can at least absorb a lot of damage from archer units. So I think Malians are stronger than you might think, given the fact that their scrums are awful and they're missing halberdiers. I think we got to put them in the B tier for all the other things that they can do. Okay, next up we have the Mayans, and the Mayans, unfortunately, they are going to be our first D tier civilization on this list. You have fully upgraded halberdiers, and you do have skirmishers that can benefit from the, I believe it's the Holche Javelineers technology, which basically includes an extra javelin that your skirmishers are throwing. This can be helpful, especially helpful against siege rams, because that extra javelin is doing 0 melee damage, and siege rams have -3 melee armor. So it's actually doing pretty good damage because it's like perhaps +2 and then actually +3, so it's like +5 damage. Again, not to get too mathy with it, you can be really getting against spearmen. It'll help you out a bit with champions and some other units, but it's still just not very strong in the trash war setting yet. I just don't think it's turning fights that you would lose into fights that you would win. Right? I think it's going to help you be good against units that skirmishers are typically bad against, whether it's siege weapons or champions or even hussars. But I don't think that it's turning the outcomes of those battles. It's just taking a civilization that's already not very good in trash wars and giving them a little bit of help. You're missing cavalry, and you don't have champions either. So you really don't have a trash busting unit in this army. And if the opponent does have a trash busting unit, you can't go eagles against it, and so you would have to try and switch into some kind of archer unit. But if they have skirmishers, it just gets really difficult with Mayans in the late game. All of the American civs are pretty vulnerable late. I just think that Aztecs and Incas do a better job of covering their bases. Mayans, I just think, are a bit more vulnerable, and that's why they're going to be our first D tier civ. Next up, we have the Mongols. Mongols are going to keep us in the C tier. So their hussars are really great melee fighters with plus 30% HP. They do die a bit more to range options because they're missing the last armor upgrade. Your skirmishers are reasonable. You're missing the last armor upgrade, but you are missing halberdiers. Your champions are fully upgraded though, except for the fact you're missing supplies, so it can be a little tough to afford. You're missing two-man saw and a crop rotation, so you do run a risk of burning through your wood with Mongols in a trash war. I think it's a C tier civ. Lean on your hussars. Maybe see if you can mix in champions. There's a lot of food to be spending on an economy that's not very good at generating food at that stage of the game. But right, that's probably the way you want to play it. C tier for me. Next up, we have the Persians. Persians are extremely, extremely interesting. This might be kind of a weird pick here. I think Persians have to go in the S tier. It's either an S or an A tier. So here's the thing. You have fully upgraded hussars, fully upgraded halberdiers. That's awesome. And let me tell you some bad things. Your skirmish miss bracer. That sucks. And not only do you miss champion, you also miss two-handed swordsman. So things are not looking great here for the Persians. But the thing about Persians is that Persians have trash bows, right? And Persian trash bows are still quite strong, right? You remove the gold cost from your crossbows, and now I believe there's 65 wood. The fact that you can go fully upgraded hussars and trash bow as a late game comp in a Persian army, that is a very, 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 very tough unit composition to stop against, because the hussars can take care of the skirms, which are really going to be the only threat to the crossbows. And Persian crossbows are really not that bad. You're missing bracer and you're missing arbalist. You're getting everything else. You're getting all the armor, right? You're getting thumb ring in that. Persian crossbows are not bad. Commander is a really nice technology. And honestly, fully upgraded hussars plus trash bows, I think can be really, really strong. And with the trash bows, are going to give you that high DPS. They're really making up for the fact that you don't get skirmishers. I gotta say, to me, this is an S tier trash civ, and it's one that I really liked playing in Trash Wars myself, and so I'd recommend it to anybody. All right, next up we have the Poles, and the Poles, well, Poles have to go into the S tier because they get halberdiers. Oh, wait, they don't get halberdiers. Huh, funny. Everybody knows that, right? A little inside joke for people who've been a fan of the channel for a bit. Okay, so Poles, for me, I think they got to go in the B tier. I think the winged hussars are great, right? You are missing the lost armor upgrade, but you can get trample damage with them. They do a lot of attack. You have decent skirms, right? Bracer, no last armor upgrade. Champions are good. The Obu is just an insanely strong, unique infantry unit from the castle. It's also pretty cheap, and it helps the damage potential of all your other units. Insanely strong. You have some nice eco. Particularly the full work, you're going to have a lot of food. But you are missing halberdiers with the Poles. And the other thing, you know what? Okay, hold on. What I didn't factor into my notes is that you can remove the gold cost in your knights by 60%. And that's so huge. I don't know why I didn't put it on my notes. That bumps Poles up to A tier. The fact that you have cavaliers that cost 60 food and 30 gold, that's a trash killing unit. But it's also a unit that kills basically everything that's not enemy halberdiers or camels. And you can just get such a mass of them. You know what I'm going to do? Poles are just... I think that bonus for a trash war setting is so strong. Oh, What do we do? Pulse. You know what? Let's call it A tier, actually, because in a trash war, you're not going to have that much gold in the map anyways. And you still do need the 30 gold. And even with something like champions, right? Champions, you're not going to be able to mix in a ton of them, but you have maybe enough numbers to change the outcomes of fights. I think that the same is probably true for poles, but the problem is that you're still weak to halberdiers. So if it's a halberdier army that you're dealing with, that's not going to be effective still. So like maybe you can raid with it, but then if you're raiding, raid with wing hussars. So I think that poles are fine in the A tier actually, and I'm comfortable with them now. They're not quite up to S tier, but I do think there's probably moments in a trash war. Let's say if you had a lot of relics, poles might be an S tier trash civ. But after that, I don't know. Gets pretty tricky. Okay, next up we have the Portuguese, and let me blow your minds and surprise you. Portuguese, I'm also going to put in the S tier. Look, you have fully upgraded light cavalry and skirmishers. That's really nice. Only missing hussars on the light cav. Your halberdiers are only missing squires, right? Kind of sucks, but they'll fight against halberdiers just the same. You get fully upgraded champions for really cheap because you're of the discount on gold cost for all your units. That applies to all of your units. So you might be able to get to Arbalest faster than somebody else. You might be able to make some knights when somebody else couldn't. You could say make monks, whatever it is, siege weapons. This is helping you out everywhere. But it's not only that. With Portuguese, you also have the Feitoria in late game, and I know it doesn't often come up. But if with Portuguese, if you see yourself going into a trash war, and you can plop down a couple of Feitorias, you basically aren't in a trash war anymore because you're going to always have a trickle of not only food, wood, but also gold and stone, and you can just take that stuff and sell it at the market. So I think Portuguese are insanely strong. This is one of the reasons, the Feitoria is one of the reasons why the Portuguese are so strong in maps like Islands, because basically you just wait out the other civ while they're burning wood and things like that. You have Feitorias, and you don't run out of resources, right? Portuguese are almost a trick question to the best trash war civ because in some ways, because of also the gold discount of their units, in some ways they kind of aren't even playing the trash war. So the Portuguese are the Kobayashi Maru of the trash wars, and hey, apparently that's how you win the game. So Portuguese, I'm going to put them in the S tier. I think that they're very strong in that sort of situation. Okay, next up we have the Saracens, and for me, Saracens are a pretty easy B tier. You have fully upgraded elite skirmishers, fully upgraded hussars, fully upgraded champions. The only thing you're missing is halberdiers, which does really hurt. That definitely keeps you no higher than the B tier for me, but that's fine. All right, next up on the list, we have the Sicilians. And I really think Sicilians are another S tier civ. There's a lot of great trash war civilizations in the game. Is something you should be taking away. Fully upgraded halbs, fully upgraded light cavalry. Your skirmishers are missing the last armor upgrade, but the fact that you reduce bonus damage, 50% bonus damage on all your units is insane. Sicilian skirms basically take only half damage from other fully upgraded skirmishers. That's nuts. Right? That's nuts because all the damage that skirmishers do to each other is typically comprised in the damage output from the bonus damage that they're doing. So Sicilian skirmishers are insane. Sicilian halberdiers are not going to die as easily to enemy skirmishers. Your light cavalry are going to be able to fight against spear units for a lot longer and have a lot more survivability. You have fully upgraded champions. You can spam sergeants as well. I mean, if you save up some resources and get that first crusade, boom, you have 35 sergeants. You can end games there. Crop rotation for Sicilians, right? Sicilian farm upgrades give double the food. That's insane. You have farms that basically never die or never expire rather. And I think that this really, for Sicilians, to me, is what actually puts them in the S tier. Because if you're playing as Sicilians and you make sure you get crop rotation, you will have wood when your opponent does not. And that goes for whether you're playing on Arena or Arabia. So with Sicilians, it's kind of like Portuguese. You can outlast your opponent, and you're going to have wood when they don't. That is very, very, very strong. You also have access to things like siege rams. You have good units. The bonus damage is insane. Your trash is going to be really effective against other trash units. And when we're talking about a trash war, those are the matchups we're talking about. But you also have the fully upgraded champions and even sergeants if you need them. So, Sicilians for me, I have no bones about it. Putting them in the S tier. All right, next up we have the Slavs. And Slavs for me, I really think Slavs are A tier. You have fully upgraded halberdiers and champions with the Druzina technology. And since it's late game, I'm assuming we have it at this point, that can be extremely overwhelming. You have fully upgraded hussars. You have a really nice economy for spamming units out. Your siege is cheaper so that you can maybe mix in some siege rams or maybe even onagers in a bit easier than another civilization. Your skirmishers do miss bracer, and that is that really can matter, but I still think that this is a really, really strong civ. Again, missing bracer really hurts. I think that that's enough to take them out, and just the fact that it may be difficult if you can't get to Druzina, then all of a sudden it's a much less viable trash civilization. So it really is all dependent on if you can get to the Druzina technology or not. And so for me, because that question is lingering in the air, I think we have to keep them out of the S tier, because a lot of the other civilizations on this list, they are going to be able to get to that technology, because say Magyars, Kravinian army, not that expensive, right? Commanderin for trash bows, not that expensive. Sicilians don't rely on it, etc., so on and so forth. So I just think that we really gotta, we have to factor in that uncertainty into our analysis here, and that to me is going to put them in the A tier. Still a really good trash civilization. Okay, next up we have the Spanish, and Spanish are also S tier. This is really by virtue of the fact that they have all the trash units fully upgraded, and they have fully upgraded champions, and there's no gold cost on their blacksmith upgrades. And well, this is not usually that important. It can be really important in the late game when gold is low. And so if you are teched into, say, 2 trash units, if you're Spanish and you think, oh gosh, well, I really need skirmishers, Spanish have a really easy time actually mixing those skirmishers back in and getting all the upgrades, because you're mainly just spending food. So Spanish are a really nice civilization there, and that to me is going to put them in the S tier. Next up, we have the Tatars, and for me, Tatars going to wind up in the A tier. Your Hussars are top 3 because you're going to have an extra pierce armor once you research silk armor, which is not that expensive. You have fully upgraded elite skirmishers. The hill bonus can actually be really strong with Tatars as well. I think you have to factor the Keshik, their unique cavalry unit at the Castle Age. Not only does it not cost that much gold, only 40 gold to get to, and then 60 food, but it also produces gold while it fights. So in practice, it really costs less than 40 gold. That's very strong. It's something that should kind of remind you of the Poles in a way, right? Where the knights are pretty cheap. Keshiks are something less than 40 gold per unit, as long as they're actually fighting a little bit before they die. The problem with Tatars is that you could be really weak from your barracks. Your halberdiers, which you do get, are missing both armor upgrades, so they're pretty awful. And your 2-handed swordsmen are garbage. You're missing champion. So I think that Tatars have a lot going for them. I think the Timurrid Siegecraft to give your trebuchets a longer range can increase their survivability. You do get Siege Ram. Again, I'm comfortable saying they're an A-tier trash civilization. Even though they do have some notable weaknesses, they have a good bit making up for it. Okay, next up we have the Teutons. And Teutons for me, I'm sorry to say, I think they're a D-tier trash civ. You only have scouts. That's not very good. Your skirmishers missing bracer, again, not very good, because you really want that damage output for them. I believe you do get all the armor upgrades, so that's okay, but we're talking about bad light cavalry line, bad skirmisher line. The halberdiers are pretty good. You do get +2 melee armor, so they're going to be able to beat other halberdiers, but again, they should be. It's a civ that I think can just suffer. You do have Teutonic Knights and fully upgraded champions, though. Man, this list. This is one of the most difficult lists to come up with. And the champions are benefiting from that melee armor. And really in the Trash War, the Hussar is really the only unit that can go toe-to-toe with the champions and come out on top due to sheer numbers. But having the melee armor, you know what? All right, Teutons, I've convinced myself. And then you mix in a couple of Teutonic Knights in there that are not going to be damaged that much by, even if they're just regular Teutonic Knights. Teutons, I'll put them in the C tier. Teutonic Knights now, you're not going to be able to make a lot of them because they're very expensive, especially on the gold front for an infantry unit. But I think even mixing in, honestly, just a few Teutonic Knights, if you have a few relics and you save up that gold, it can actually really help you. So, okay. All right, I'll go along with it. I'll say Teutons are C tier, right? Because we're just playing jazz here. Now, I'll tell you a civilization that we're not going to change on this list, and that's the Turks, and they're going into a D tier. If I had an F tier on this list, we'd put Turks there. This is the story. The good thing is that you have top 3 Hussars, you have an extra Pierce Armor throughout the whole game, and you don't have to pay for any upgrades, so you get them immediately. Fantastic. Champions, fully upgraded. Also fantastic. Problems. You only get the Spearmen. No Pikes, no Helps, just Spearmen. That is bad, 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 bad. Skirmishers, you don't get Elite Skirmisher. Just get regular Skirmisher. Again, bad, 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 bad. Turks, D tier trash civ. Basically with Turks, you are relying on your Hussars in whatever combination you go for. And if you're in a trash war, you need more than just one trash unit to be able to spam. Sorry, it's just not going to work. Right. It's not going to work out for Turks, so sorry to tell you. Okay, Vietnamese. Vietnamese are tricky. I think that Vietnamese are a B tier trash civilization. You have halberdiers, champions, and light cavalry without blast furnace. So it's really hurting your damage potential there. But you have a great skirmisher in the Imperial skirmisher. Oh man, this is so tough. There's somewhere between B and A. The Imperial skirmisher is great. Well, since we're playing jazz here, I mean, you do have the options. You have the champs, you have light cav, you get the armor upgrades, you do have the halbs. I think it really just depends on how well you value Imperial skirmishers. I actually tend to value them quite a bit. I think that they're very, very strong late, and they do a lot better against even units that skirmishers are often weak to because they have more damage, they have good pierce armor, and with Vietnamese you have even extra HP. So it's a very strong unit. I'm going to put Vietnamese into the A tier, probably one of the weaker A tier civs there. Okay, next up and last, and well, we're going to see if it's least. We're going to look at the Vikings. Vikings are going to go in the C tier. So you do have pretty good skirmishers. Missing Thumb Ring now doesn't really hurt them as much. The Viking pikes are tricky to think about in post-imp. I think they're still pretty good because you have so much extra HP. The fact that you are missing halberdiers is fine. The fact that you have chieftains means that you're making up for a lot of the bonus damage you miss against hussars. Your cavalry is just awful. And at this stage of the game, your economic bonus is probably not having an effect anymore. You get siege ram. I think you have some things going for them. You have really, really tanky champions. You can mix in berserks. And even Castle Age upgraded berserks now are still pretty good. I think it's the berserks that really does it for me. You don't really have a standout trash unit, but you have enough here to where I think Vikings could be C tier. I think it's even possible that Vikings push into the B tier in a trash war setting. Excuse me, in a trash war setting. But I'm going to go ahead. I will leave them at C tier just because I still think that the pikes are probably just sort of making up for missing halbs and not really giving you anything more. And the light cav is so awful. you know, and so it's like, okay, well, you do have great skirms. And then, again, this is all dependent. If the question here is, do you have the gold economy to keep berserks going or get champions going? That uncertainty for me plays a really big role because I've definitely been in a lot of situations where I don't have those resources and I really wish I did have them. So that's going to do it. This is a pretty long video, but there's so much to talk about in the Trash Wars. And what you can see from this game is that, or what this tier list shows you, I think it's actually, I mean, first of all, outside of the 2 D tier civilizations we have, it's pretty even, right? So this is more of like a uniform distribution of civilizations into the Trash Wars. About a quarter are going to be fantastic, another quarter are going to be really good, then some are going to be pretty decent, and then some are going to kind of be a little weaker, and then we've got 2 that just are not so hot. So all in all, right, if you're going into a Trash War, I don't think that you should be too anxious if you have really a lot of these civilizations. But what you do want to think about, and the reason we've gone through all this in this video, is you do want to think about just the fact that you have different strengths with each civilization, so you want to make sure that you use them effectively, right? Every civilization has a weakness in their trash lineup. Every civilization is going to have a pretty strong unit. I mean, even Turks have a really strong Hussar. So you want to figure out what you can do, how you can mix certain things in, and that's going to be your best bet to trying to win a Trash War, is getting those units spammed out and making your side stronger than the other. Saying it out loud makes it sound really, really simple, but actually in practice, it can be very difficult. So with that, I'm going to go ahead in the video. And if you like this video, you like the channel, hit us that like and subscribe and help us satisfy the algorithm gods and grow this channel. And we have a lot more content coming for you. And well, maybe not coming for you in like a, you know, going to catch you kind of way, but have a lot of content that you should enjoy. So all that awkward ending here. Trash Wars end awkwardly too. So we're going to go ahead and end the video here, and I'll see you guys out there on the ladder. Peace.